Yo, what's up, everyone? It's your boy Jack OATz to go. You either know or you don't. First and foremost, as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in, even though you don't have to. So I told you guys in the end of the last video that I was going to put out another video talking about something cool that could be introducing a new race or a different type of race that's already been introduced in Black Clover. As well as going over some stuff about Alicia, as well as the magic stone that Yuno has with him. I think this video is going to be pretty cool. Definitely some food for thought, but definitely not something I've seen or heard anyone talk about. And I actually just stumbled upon this. I don't even know what I was looking at, to be honest with you. But I mean, when you guys start hearing the terms, you guys will understand, like, oh shit, like this is a thing. So I wanted to talk about Yuno, and what exactly makes him so special. And I know the beginning sounds just like what I said 2 videos ago, but this one is different because this one suggests that Yuno is and is not from where he is said to be from. So there's a place in lore and in history, and this place is called Hyperborea, and these are where the Hyperboreans live. So, like I said, there are mythical accounts of Hyperboreans, and there's also historical accounts of Hyperborean. So I'll be going over just relevant things. There's a lot on this, but I'll just stick to the relevant parts. But as you can guess, this has to do with Boreas, because the name Hyperboreans, it was to describe a mythical people who lived in the far northern part of the known world. Their name appears to derive from the Greek beyond Boreas, which is the personified north wind, although some scholars prefer derivation, which would mean to carry over. Despite the location in an otherwise richer part of the world, the Hyperboreans were believed to inhabit a sunny, temperate, and divinely blessed land. In many versions of the story, they lived north of the Riphean Mountains, which shield them from the effects of the cold north wind. The oldest myths portray them as favorites of Apollo, and some ancient Greek writers regarded the Hyperboreans as the mythical founders of Apollo shrines at Delos and Delphi. Later writers disagreed on the existence and location of the Hyperboreans, with some regarding them as purely mythological, and others connecting them to real-world peoples and places in northern Europe. In medieval and Renaissance literature, the Hyperboreans came to signify remoteness and exoticism. Modern scholars consider the Hyperborean myth to be an amalgam of ideas from ancient utopianism, or edge-of-earth stories, the cult of Apollo, and exaggerated reports of phenomena in northern Europe, for example, like the Arctic midnight sun. So, as the description points out, and as I pointed out in the very beginning, there are mythological accounts as well as real-world historical accounts of this place and these people. And I think it was just very interesting to even find that, scientists do believe that these were exaggerated reports of phenomena in the northern Europe, and the example was the midnight sun. I thought that was very interesting because, of course, they could have named almost anything, and the midnight sun was one of them. So it kind of brings you back to the eye of the midnight sun, and their whole thing. And this is ultimately, for me, going to come back to elves. But I'll read a little bit on the location of Hyperborea, but I won't do the whole thing, as it's not extremely relevant, but it does have a place in this little theory here. The Hyperboreans were believed to live beyond the snowy Riphean Mountains. According to Pausanias, the land of Hyperboreans meant living beyond the home of Boreas. Homer placed Boreas in Thrace, and before Hyperborea was, in his opinion, north of Thrace in Dacia. Sophocles and Callimachus also believed that Boreas was in Thrace. Other ancient writers, however, believe that the home of Boreas, or the Riphean Mountains, were in different locations. For example, Hecataeus believed that the Riphean Mountains were adjacent to the Black Sea. Alternatively, Pindar placed the home of Boreas, the Riphean Mountains, and Hyperborea all near the Danube. In contrast, Amaticus, it's so hard saying this, Antimachus, identified the Riphean Mountains with the Alps and the Hyperboreans as a Celtic tribe, perhaps the Helvetii, who lived just beyond them. And then lastly, Aristotle placed the Riphean Mountains on the borders of Scythia and Hyperborea further north. So, as you can see, a lot of this was under debate, and I think that's really interesting in and of itself. Just off of lore, these very prominent figures, philosophers and scientists, are kind of battling it out between, like, okay, number one, is this only myth, or is this a real life thing? And it was taken so seriously that it went throughout time, and there's more modern accounts of where people believe Hyperborea is. But it is really, I think this is really interesting for me. As far as legends go, I'm just reading this right off of Wiki for those that care. But all of this stuff is really, it's interesting. Anyway, along with Thule, Hyperborea was one of several terrae incognitae to the Greeks and Romans, where Pliny, Pindar, and Herodotus, as well as Virgil and Cicero, reported that people lived to the age of 1,000 and enjoyed lives of complete happiness. Hecataeus collated all the stories about the Hyperboreans current in the 4th century BC and published a lengthy treatise on them, lost to us but noted by Diodorus. Also, the sun was supposed to rise and only set once a year in Hyperborea, which would place it above or upon the Arctic Circle, or more generally in the Arctic polar regions. So this is, a pretty interesting part, right? They go on to describe Hyperboreans as being extremely white with fair hair. And this is just one of the descriptions. I'm going to get to the other one in just a bit, where I think has a bit more credence to the story that we are reading right now. But to me, it sounds like the physical description that some of these philosophers gave them were more so elven-like in our story of Black Clover. Where we have a guy like Licht, who's got very fair hair, very white skin. All of them do, for the most part. Of course, not someone like Raya, but it shows that this could mean that there are different races of elves living among each other, and Hyperboreans might be the stronger of the elves, if that is the case. To go on, there's an ancient Greek writer, Theopompus, in his work Philippica. I said it right the first time and I doubted myself. I don't know why I did that. It's late. But he claimed that Hyperborea was once planned to be conquered by a large race of soldiers from another island, and some actually believe that it was Atlantis. And the plan was abandoned because the soldiers from Meropis realized the Hyperboreans were too strong for them and the most blessed of people. This unusual tale, which some believe was satire or comedy, was preserved by the Varia Historia. So Theseus visited the Hyperboreans, and Pindar transferred Perseus's encounter with Medusa there from its traditional site in Libya to the dissatisfaction of his Alexandrian editors. So, as you can see, this legend, this myth, has been tampered with and messed around by many, many writers. But I brought up that last point where it says that Theseus visited the Hyperboreans, and then Pindar transferred Perseus' encounter with Medusa from Hyperborea to Libya, because Hyperboreans have a relationship with two very prominent figures that I have mentioned on this channel before. And one of them is the Grey, the sisters, with Enyo and all that. Made, I think, at least 2 or 3 videos on them. And then the Moirae, which are the Sisters of Fate, right? So I think it is very crucial to point out those relationships because, like I said in my video on the Grey, I believe that we'll see something from them, and it seems like this Magicula and Vonica relationship does have some Grey-ish vibes to it. We need more evidence, though, before we can fully confirm. But we do have the Moirae. And no matter what lore Tabata decides to go off of, the Sisters of Fate are very prominent. And we already have evidence that is very real with just Vanessa existing within the series. And then you have Grey, and then you have someone like Magicula, the Blood Queen, and all that. And actually, Broku pointed out who a third sister could be. I don't want to spoil it because I think he might want to make a video on that, but I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, with Fate in the hands, or with people abiding by the laws of fate in the hands of it, that's going to be very important. And then especially with a character like Yuno, where it seems that fate seems to be on his side for the most part from the beginning to current. So we'll have to see more, but there's a little more in Hyperborean, so let me keep reading it to you guys. So this is talking about Hyperboreans in Delos, which is south of them, like very far south for them. Alone among the 12 Olympians, Apollo was venerated among the Hyperboreans, the Greeks thought. He spent his winters among them. According to Herodotus, offerings from the Hyperboreans came to Scythia packed with straw, and they were passed from tribe to tribe until they arrived at Dodona, and from them to the Greek peoples until they too came to Apollo's temple in Delos. He says they used this method because the first time the gifts were brought by 2 maidens, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but Hyporike and Laudis, with an escort of 5 men, but none of them returned. To prevent that, since then the Hyperboreans brought the gifts to their borders and asked the neighbors to deliver them to the next country, and so on until they arrived to Delos. Now this part is really cool to me, just because I gotta keep that in mind. I want to read this next part and then the one last part before I come back around to this, because I think it's going to start connecting some things here. To go on, it says, Herodotus also details that the other 2 virgin maidens, Arge and Opis, had come from Hyperborea to Delos before as a tribute to the goddess Alethea for ease of childbearing, accompanied by the gods themselves. The maidens received honors in Delos, where the women collected gifts from them and sang hymns to them. So they had the 2 women that came from Hyperborea that went to Delos with the gifts as a tribute to the goddess Alethea, which is also pronounced Alicia. So I thought that was really interesting that we have this connection between Hyperboreans and then the goddess Alicia, and of course we have the place Alicia in Black Clover, and then we have this form of Boreas, very intentional to me. And the Dryad is showing them like where souls are born, where they go, and all that stuff. It just seems like a very intentional connection to me. So to keep going, really cool side bit here. We have a character that was specifically pointed out among the Hyperboreans, and this character's name is Abaris. A particular Hyperborean legendary healer was known as Abaris, or Abaris the Healer, from Herodotus first described in his work. So, I mean, that's really all there is on that. But if Yuno gets a healing spell, I think we can expect it to be named a Baris, or the healing of a Baris, or something, right? If this is truly what Yuno's form is based off of. So, I'd like to now go to the this part here. This is Hyperborea in modern esoteric thought. So it says, according to Jason Jeffrey, all shared, and H.P. Blavatsky, Renee, and Julius Evola all shared the belief in the Hyperborean polar origins of mankind and the subsequent solidification in de-evolution. Blavatsky describes the Hyperboreans as the origin of the second root race and as non-intelligent ethereal creatures that reproduce by budding. However, Jeffrey's account may contradict some theosophical tenets, as according to other authors like Santucci, the theosophy sees the passage from one root race to another as always evolution, never de-evolution. Thus, the Hyperborean cannot be superior to modern man. But according to these esoterics, Hyperborea was the golden age, polar center of civilization and spirituality. Mankind does not rise from the ape, but progressively devolves into the ape-like condition as it strays physically and spiritually from its mystical, otherworldly homeland in the far north, succumbing to the demonic energies of the South Pole, the greatest point of materialization. So, I thought it was very interesting that they went from having a very physical race to having a non-physical, more ethereal race. I thought that was interesting. And then the fact that they bring in that they don't rise, like we don't rise from the ape condition, we devolve into it, is the whole Jacob's Ladder idea of ascension. So, as this kind of keeps going into Yuno possibly ascending by the end of this arc. And I know a lot of people were kind of throwing around some things like, okay, Yuno has this form because he's in the Spade Kingdom, and we know that Boreas is the god of the north winds, or the icy winds, and he's in the Spade Kingdom where it is literally icy. So that's why his form got a whole boost. And we could kind of be right in a sense if we go with that. But he's getting he's getting closer to his roots. And to go back to the series, remember, Yuno's birth was very highly sought after. This wasn't just, to me, it didn't seem like they were just waiting on an heir to the throne. I mean, they really could have had sex at any time and like, oh, yo, got a son, got a daughter, oh, hey, it seemed a bit more serious than that. And so that brings me to Lois and Ciel, where are either or both Hyperborean? And I've got a theory for both. So remember, we talked about two virgin maidens, Arj and Opus, that had come from Hyperborea, and were aided by Alethea for childbearing. So it is possible that that Yuno's mother could be Hyperborean. While that might be cool, I feel like there's a much better way of giving Yuno this Hyperborean background. Okay, so we just went over the more modern esoteric thought of Hyperboreans, where they believe they're ethereal beings, and they were reproduced by budding. So what still remains true, and this is the part that really hasn't been tampered with as much as the other parts, is how gifts were sent between Hyperboreans and the people in Delos, way down south. So the thing is that, and they even point out some contradictions of them being non-intelligent ethereal beings. But if you're not intelligent, how are you sending gifts and all that stuff, right? So here's my thought, is if Tabata is actually going for this, and they are ethereal beings, the gifts they send, let's say this, the gift they sent in Black Clover was the magic stone. Because remember, Yuno's father in the flashback says, when he came back alive, like he was like, I came back alive, and found this magic stone, that was more than likely a gift from Hyperboreans. And remember when they say, Herodotus says that they reproduce by budding. So if this magic stone is the result of just them concentrating, I don't know, their essence or mana within that magic stone, and they give it to the royalty of the spade, or in this case, Delos, then the child that is birthed through that could have some Hyperborean background. Now, it's like a third party, just like pregnancy, if you will. So while it wasn't Ciel and a Hyperborean, it was Ciel and Lois and some Hyperborean influence via that magic stone. And they remember when they describe Hyperborea itself, they say it's a blessed land, and it just goes to show, like, he's blessed, he's loved by mana, and if these are the strongest beings, it would make sense why Yuno and his magic behave the way it does. I think there's a bit more here, but I think this is good enough to just introduce the fact that we might have that might be what's above the Spade Kingdom, even more elves, and I would say the elves that we ended up getting that comprise the Sephiroth may come from different lands in the world, and that was more so the tribe that they held was a conglomerate of all of them. If I had to guess, that's what I would go with. I really don't. I don't know, like, what it could be, what it couldn't. I don't write the story. All I can do is, share with you guys what I find. I thought this was a really interesting find. I had no idea that there was a whole place and people based off of Boreas. It was a very cool thing to find for me. But like I said, there is a lot more that goes into this, and maybe if I look into it a bit more, I can give you guys, more takes and more places that this stuff can fit. But for now, like I said, I think this is a good introduction to, possibly having some Hyperborean background. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below or on Twitter. You guys know where to find me. I will see you guys in the next video. Hope you liked it. This has been OATz to go. You either know or you don't.